The flashing lights appeared suddenly in the rearview mirror. Blue and red reflections stretched across the empty highway like warning signals from another world. The black SUV slowed smoothly, pulling onto the shoulder without hesitation. Inside, the driver remained calm, hands steady on the wheel, eyes forward, as if traffic stops were simply part of the rhythm of life. Because sometimes they were. The patrol car stopped behind him, door opened, boots hit pavement, measured steps approached the vehicle. Officer Daniel Briggs had been on duty for 11 hours, tired, frustrated, and carrying opinions he rarely questioned. He tapped the side of the SUV with 2 fingers, a signal, authority. The window rolled down slowly. The man inside looked composed, mid-50s, dressed simply, no visible signs of status. To Briggs, he looked like just another driver who didn't belong in a vehicle like that. Assumptions formed quickly. They always did. "License and registration," Briggs said. No greeting, no explanation, just control. The man nodded calmly. "Of course, officer." His voice carried quiet confidence, not arrogance, not fear, just certainty. He handed over the documents without hesitation. Briggs glanced down, then paused. The name meant nothing to him. Yet. "What's your destination?" Briggs asked sharply. "Washington," the man replied. "That's a long drive." "Yes." Briggs studied him more closely. Something about the calm bothered him. People usually reacted differently. Nervous, defensive, overly polite. This man simply existed, unbothered, and that unsettled him. "You know why I stopped you?" Briggs asked. "No," the man said calmly. "You were drifting across lanes." The man nodded once. "I see." No argument, no tension, just acceptance. It felt wrong somehow, as if the power dynamic wasn't working the way Briggs expected. He walked back toward the patrol car, running the license through the system. The screen loaded slowly. Data flickered. He waited. Nothing unusual appeared immediately. Just a name, a clean record. But something else caught his eye. A small notation, restricted clearance. Briggs frowned. He didn't recognize the code. Probably nothing important. He dismissed it. Returning to the SUV, he leaned slightly closer. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. The words carried sharper authority now. The man raised an eyebrow slightly. "Is there a problem?" "I said step out." A pause. The man complied. Slow movements, hands visible, calm, always calm. Cars passed on the highway, wind rushing by. Briggs circled slowly, watching carefully. Years of instinct shaped his posture, but instinct sometimes reflected belief more than reality. "You traveling alone?" he asked. "Yes." "No security detail?" The man smiled faintly. "Not today." The answer irritated him, too vague, too confident. "You mind if I search the vehicle?" The man hesitated briefly, not long enough to refuse, just long enough to consider. "Is there a specific reason?" Briggs's tone hardened. "Are you refusing?" "No," the man said quietly. "I'm asking for clarity." The difference mattered, but Briggs didn't hear it that way. He heard challenge. Behind them, another vehicle approached, black, unmarked. It slowed, then stopped several yards back. Briggs noticed but ignored it. Backup often arrived unannounced. He turned back toward the driver. "Face the vehicle," he said. The man complied again, calm, unshaken, and that calm began to feel almost unsettling. Because authority expects reaction, fear, defensiveness, something. But this man simply waited, as if he already knew how this would end. And then, the door of the unmarked vehicle opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out quickly. Another followed. Earpieces visible, movements precise, professional. Briggs turned slowly, confusion creeping into his posture. The suited man approached, fast, focused, and when he spoke, his voice carried quiet urgency. "Officer, do you know who you just pulled over?" Before we begin, this is one of those stories that might change how you see people forever. If you enjoy deep emotional storytelling, gently subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Briggs frowned. "No," he said. The suited man glanced toward the calm driver, then back at him. "You might want to check that license again." The highway fell silent, and everything was about to change. The wind from passing cars rushed loudly across the highway's shoulder, but for Officer Daniel Briggs, the world suddenly felt very quiet. "You might want to check that license again." The suited man's voice carried calm authority, not aggressive, not panicked, just certain. Briggs frowned. He didn't like uncertainty, and he definitely didn't like being corrected during a stop. "Who are you?" Briggs asked sharply. The man reached into his jacket slowly, producing identification. Briggs glanced at it. Federal credentials. His posture shifted slightly. But not enough. Not yet. "What's going on?" Briggs asked. The suited man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the driver, still standing calmly beside the SUV, hands resting lightly against the vehicle, unbothered, patient, as if he had seen this kind of moment before. "Sir," the suited man said respectfully to the driver, "are you all right?" "I'm fine," the man replied. His voice remained steady. No anger, no urgency. Just quiet composure. Briggs felt irritation rise. The dynamic felt wrong. He was the one in control here. Or at least, he thought he was. "Listen," Briggs said, turning back toward the suited man. "This is a traffic stop. If you're interfering—" "I'm not interfering," the man said calmly. "I'm clarifying." He stepped slightly closer. "Run the identification again." Briggs hesitated. Authority challenged always felt personal. But something in the man's tone, calm, confident, unshakable, made him reconsider. He turned toward his patrol car, walked back, opened the door, and rechecked the license. The screen flickered. Name, date of birth. Then, additional fields loaded, restricted access, clearance override, federal priority notification. Briggs leaned closer, confusion turning into uncertainty. Then, a new alert appeared. One he had never seen before. Federal protective status. Notify supervisory command immediately. His breath paused. He read it again. And again, the weight of the moment began to settle. Slowly, uncomfortably. He stepped out of the patrol car again. The highway noise returned suddenly, louder than before. The suited man watched him carefully. "Well?" he asked quietly. Briggs hesitated. "What does that mean?" The suited man exhaled slowly. "It means," he said gently, "you pulled over someone whose position requires federal protection." The words landed heavily. Briggs turned toward the driver. The man met his gaze calmly. No triumph, no anger, just quiet patience. "Who are you?" Briggs asked. The man considered the question briefly, then answered simply. "My name is Director Marcus Hale." The title landed like a shockwave. FBI Director. The realization hit slowly, like gravity settling into place. Briggs's posture stiffened. Training clashed with instinct, embarrassment mixed with confusion. But something else lived underneath. Defensiveness. Because authority rarely accepts sudden reversal easily. "I didn't know," he said quickly. Director Hale nodded. "I can see that." His tone wasn't accusing, but it wasn't dismissive either. It simply existed, honest and neutral. And somehow, that made it harder. "You were drifting lanes," Briggs said, almost reflexively, trying to regain control of the situation. "I understand," Hale replied calmly. "And you were doing your job." The words were kind, measured, but they carried deeper meaning. Because tone matters. And Hale's tone suggested he understood more than Briggs wanted him to. The suited agents remained still, observing carefully. One of them spoke quietly. "Director, would you like to continue your journey?" Hale glanced briefly toward Briggs, then back at the agent. "In a moment." He turned fully toward the officer now. "You asked me several questions," Hale said calmly. "Yes." "And I answered." "Yes." A pause. "But I have a question for you." The words shifted the dynamic completely. Authority flipped. Briggs felt it immediately. "What question?" he asked. Hale's gaze remained steady. "Would you have treated me the same way if you had known who I was?" Silence fell hard between them. Cars rushed by. Wind moved across the asphalt. But everything else faded. Because suddenly, this was no longer just a traffic stop. It was a mirror. And Briggs didn't like what it reflected. The question hung in the air longer than expected. "Would you have treated me the same way if you had known who I was?" Director Marcus Hale's voice remained calm, almost gentle, but the weight behind it felt undeniable. Officer Daniel Briggs didn't answer immediately. Training told him to stay composed. Instinct told him to defend himself. But something deeper, something uncomfortable, stirred beneath both. Cars rushed past on the highway, wind pressing against uniforms and jackets, yet the moment felt strangely still. "I was doing my job," Briggs said finally. The words came quickly, almost automatic. Hale nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. A pause. "But that wasn't my question." Silence deepened. The suited agents remained several steps back, watching carefully but not intervening. They knew this moment wasn't about protocol anymore. It was about understanding. Briggs felt irritation rise again. The situation had shifted too fast. Moments ago, he held authority. Now he felt exposed. "I treat everyone the same," he said. Hale tilted his head slightly. "Do you?" The tone wasn't accusatory. That made it worse, because it invited reflection instead of confrontation. Briggs crossed his arms slightly. "Yes," Hale nodded again. "I believe you think that." The distinction landed heavily. "You think that? Not you do that." The difference pressed quietly into Briggs's chest. A long silence followed. Hale spoke again, softer now. "When you approached my vehicle," he said, "you didn't greet me." Briggs frowned. "That's not required." "No," Hale agreed. "But it tells me something about your mindset." The words felt precise, like someone describing a pattern rather than making an accusation. "You asked for a search quickly," Hale continued. "I had reasonable suspicion," Briggs replied defensively. "Perhaps," Hale said calmly. Another pause. "But your tone suggested expectation, not curiosity." The observation hit harder than any accusation, because it felt accurate. Briggs shifted slightly. "I stopped you because of driving behavior," he said. "I'm not questioning the stop," Hale replied gently. "I'm asking about what happened after." The difference mattered, and Briggs felt it. The highway noise faded again into the background. Something about Hale's presence felt different from anyone Briggs had encountered before. Not confrontational, not submissive, just deeply aware, as if he saw beyond the moment. "You think I targeted you," Briggs said. Hale shook his head slowly. "I think you made assumptions." The word landed softly, but it carried weight. Briggs felt heat rise in his chest. "What assumptions?" Hale considered his answer carefully. "That I didn't belong in that vehicle," he said. "That I needed to justify my presence. That my calm meant defiance." Each statement felt like a mirror held up without judgment. and that made it harder to ignore. Briggs opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, because he realized he couldn't fully deny it. The agent behind Hale shifted slightly, watching closely. This wasn't just about hierarchy. It was about growth. Hale spoke again. "I've been stopped many times," he said, "by officers who didn't know who I was." A pause. Most of them never realized the moment was about more than traffic. Briggs frowned. "What do you mean?" Hale met his gaze directly. "It's never about the badge," he said quietly. "It's about how you see the person behind the wheel." The words settled heavily. Briggs felt something shift, uncomfortable, unfamiliar, self-awareness pressing against long-held habits. He had never considered his approach as anything other than normal, routine, expected. And yet, Hale's calm dismantled that certainty piece by piece. The suited agent stepped forward slightly. "Director, we should continue." Hale nodded once, but before turning away, he looked back at Briggs. "This moment isn't about embarrassment," he said gently. "It's about opportunity." The word lingered. Opportunity. Not punishment, not shame. Just a chance to see something differently. Briggs swallowed. For the first time since the stop began, he felt unsure of himself. Hale reached for the door of his SUV, then paused, turning back one last time. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. The room, the highway, the moment felt suspended. "Someone is about to arrive," he said, "and when they do, this situation may feel very different to you." Confusion crossed Briggs's face. "What does that mean?" Hale gave a faint smile. "You'll see." And in the distance, another set of lights approached. The distant lights grew brighter, not flashing like emergency vehicles. Steady, intentional, approaching quickly. Officer Daniel Briggs felt tension rise again, though he couldn't explain why. Director Marcus Hale stood calmly beside the SUV, hands resting lightly against the door, posture relaxed, almost reflective. He didn't look worried. He didn't look annoyed. He looked patient. And that unsettled Briggs more than anything else. The approaching vehicle slowed, then stopped behind the unmarked federal car, another black sedan. Dark windows, professional presence. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Mid-40s, composed, wearing a tailored dark coat. No visible badge, no visible rank. And yet the agents standing nearby straightened slightly when they saw her. Authority without announcement. She walked forward with steady confidence, eyes moving between Hale and Briggs. "Director?" she said calmly. "Assistant Director Kim," Hale replied. Her gaze shifted toward Briggs, measured, observant, not hostile, but precise. "I understand there was a traffic stop," she said. "Yes," Hale replied. "Everything all right?" "Yes." A pause. "But perhaps educational." The word landed lightly, but Briggs felt it heavily. Assistant Director Kim nodded slowly. She turned toward Briggs. "Officer," she said politely, "may I see your badge?" He hesitated only briefly before presenting it. She studied the number, memorized it instantly, then handed it back. "You understand who you stopped," she said. "Yes," Briggs replied quietly. "And you understand the significance of federal protective status." "Yes." Her gaze lingered a moment longer, not judging, evaluating. "What concerns me," she said calmly, "is not that you made the stop." Briggs blinked slightly, but how it unfolded. The words echoed Hale's earlier observations, authority stacking, one voice reinforcing another. "I followed procedure," Briggs said quickly. Kim nodded. "I'm sure you believe that." The same phrasing, the same mirror. It felt deliberate. She stepped slightly closer. "When law enforcement becomes routine," she said gently. We sometimes stop noticing our own patterns. Briggs swallowed. The highway noise felt louder now, his certainty shrinking under calm scrutiny. You asked for a search quickly, she continued. You escalated tone early. You interpreted calm as resistance. Each observation landed quietly, accurate, unavoidable. Hale watched silently, allowing the moment to unfold. Briggs shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know who he was, he said again. Kim nodded. That's exactly why this matters. The words felt heavier than anything said so far. Respect should never depend on recognition, she added softly. Silence followed, deep, unavoidable, because now the core truth stood exposed, not about status, not about hierarchy, about perception. Hale stepped forward slightly. That's why I didn't reveal my position immediately, he said. Briggs looked at him, confused. You could have ended this right away. Yes, Hale agreed. But then we would have learned nothing. The realization hit slowly. This wasn't just a traffic stop gone wrong. It had become a lesson. Briggs felt something unfamiliar move through him. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something deeper. Reflection. Kim glanced toward Hale. Do you want to escalate this formally? She asked. The question hung heavily. Formal consequences, internal reviews, career impact. Briggs's breath tightened slightly. Hale considered the question carefully, longer than expected. Then he shook his head slowly. No. Relief flickered across Briggs's face, but only briefly, because Hale wasn't finished. I believe learning creates stronger change than punishment, Hale said quietly, but only if the person chooses to see. He looked directly at Briggs, and the weight of responsibility shifted back onto the officer. Another silence followed. Different this time, not tense, reflective. Kim nodded once. Then the decision remains yours, she said to Briggs. What decision? He asked quietly. Hale answered gently. Whether this moment ends here or becomes something that changes how you wear your badge. The words settled deeply. Cars rushed past. Wind moved across the shoulder. The world continued. But for Briggs, everything felt paused, because now the power dynamic had fully flipped, and the choice was no longer about authority. It was about growth. The highway felt quieter now, even though traffic continued rushing past. Officer Daniel Briggs stood between two worlds, the one he had known before this stop, and the one beginning to form around him now. The badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier. Not physically, emotionally. Whether this moment ends here or becomes something that changes how you wear your badge. Director Marcus Hale's words lingered. They weren't a threat. They weren't even a warning. They felt like an invitation. And somehow, that made them harder to ignore. Briggs swallowed slowly. His training told him to regain control, to close the interaction, to move on. But something inside him hesitated. For the first time during the stop, he realized he was the one pausing now. I didn't mean anything by it, he said quietly. Assistant Director Kim didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched him carefully. Intent matters, she said gently, but impact matters more. The words settled deeply, because intent was where Briggs had always found safety. If he didn't mean harm, then he couldn't be wrong. But now, he wasn't sure anymore. Hale leaned lightly against the SUV. I've met thousands of officers, he said calmly. Good ones, dedicated ones. People who believe deeply in protecting others. Briggs listened silently. And sometimes, Hale continued, the hardest lesson isn't learning new rules. It's recognizing habits you never questioned. The statement felt precise, personal. Briggs exhaled slowly. He replayed the stop in his mind, the way he approached, the tone he used, the assumptions he made before knowing anything about the driver. He had always called it instinct, experience. But now, it looked different. "I thought I was being professional," he admitted quietly. Kim nodded. "Professionalism is more than procedure," she said. "It's awareness." Another silence followed, the kind that invites reflection instead of defense. Briggs glanced toward Hale. "You didn't get angry," he said. Hale gave a faint smile. "Anger closes doors," he replied. "Curiosity opens them." The simplicity of the statement felt powerful. The agent behind Hale shifted slightly, maintaining distance but observing carefully. They weren't here to discipline. They were here to witness. Briggs looked down briefly. "I've been doing this job 10 years, he said. "That means you've seen a lot," Hale replied. "Yes." "And patterns form." "Yes," Hale nodded. "That's human." The lack of judgment made it harder to resist. Briggs felt something shift internally, not sudden, not dramatic, just a quiet awareness growing. He remembered past stops, faces, conversations, moments where he had assumed more than he knew, moments he had never reconsidered until now. "What would you have done if I wasn't who I am?" Hale asked gently. The question returned again, different now, deeper. Briggs hesitated. "I probably would have written a warning," he said slowly, and walked away thinking nothing happened. Hale nodded. And yet something did happen. The truth of that landed heavily. Kim stepped slightly closer. "This is where growth begins," she said. "Not when someone forces change, but when someone recognizes it themselves." Briggs felt the words settle inside him. He had expected confrontation, punishment. Instead, he was being given responsibility. And that felt heavier. "I don't want to be that officer," he said quietly. Hale tilted his head slightly. "What officer?" "The one who makes people feel like they don't belong," Briggs admitted. The honesty surprised even him, but once spoken, it felt impossible to take back. Hale nodded slowly. "Then today matters." Silence followed. Different this time, not uncomfortable, grounded. Briggs straightened slightly. The weight on his shoulders remained, but it felt clearer now, less defensive, more aware. Hale opened the door to his SUV, then paused. "One more thing," he said gently. Briggs looked up. "The real test isn't what you say here," Hale continued. "It's how you treat the next person you stop." The words settled deeply, because suddenly the moment extended beyond this encounter, into the future, into every interaction yet to come. The engine of the SUV started. Agents moved back toward their vehicles. The moment seemed ready to end, but Briggs felt something unfinished, a realization forming. And when he spoke again, his voice carried something new. "Director." "Wait." Hale paused, turning back slowly, and the emotional shift was complete. "Director?" "Wait." The words left Officer Daniel Briggs' mouth before he fully understood why he said them. The SUV engine hummed quietly. Assistant Director Kim paused mid-step. The agent slowed, watching without interrupting. Marcus Hale turned back slowly, calm, patient, expectant. "Yes?" Hale asked gently. Briggs hesitated. For the first time since the stop began, he wasn't speaking from authority or defense. He was speaking from uncertainty, and that felt unfamiliar. "I think I owe you something," he said quietly. Hale tilted his head slightly. "What do you believe you owe me?" Briggs swallowed. The easy answer would have been an apology, but something deeper pressed forward. "Honesty," he said. The word landed softly, but it changed the tone of everything. Hale nodded once, I'm listening. Briggs exhaled slowly. When I saw you driving that SUV, he said, I made assumptions. No denial, no excuses, just truth. Kim watched carefully, recognizing the shift. This was no longer about authority. It was about accountability. I assumed you didn't belong in that vehicle, Briggs continued. The admission felt heavy, but once spoken, it opened something inside him. I assumed you might be hiding something. He paused, and I approached you like I already knew who you were. Silence followed. Deep, honest. Hale didn't interrupt. He simply listened, and that silence gave Briggs space to continue. I never thought about it before, Briggs admitted. I called it instinct. He looked down briefly. But now, I'm realizing instinct can be wrong. The realization felt raw, unpolished, real. Hale nodded slowly. That realization takes courage, he said quietly. The absence of judgment made the moment feel heavier, because Briggs could not retreat into defensiveness anymore. I don't want to be that officer, Briggs said again. Kim spoke softly. Then don't be. The simplicity of the response felt powerful. Briggs looked between them. How do you change something you didn't even know was there? He asked. Hale smiled faintly. You already started, he said. How? You stopped defending, Hale replied, and started listening. The words landed deeply. Briggs felt something loosen inside him, a tension he hadn't realized he carried. For years he had believed confidence meant certainty. Now he realized awareness required humility. I can't undo what happened today, Briggs said quietly. No, Hale agreed, but you can choose what happens next. The sentence felt like a door opening. Briggs nodded slowly. I want to learn, he said. The admission surprised him, not because he didn't mean it, but because he had never said something like that out loud before. Kim watched him carefully. Learning isn't comfortable, she said gently. I'm starting to understand that, he replied. Hale stepped closer, not as a superior, not as an authority figure, but as a person. You know, he said quietly, the most dangerous officers are not the ones who make mistakes. Briggs listened carefully. They're the ones who believe they can't. The statement settled deeply, because Briggs recognized himself in it. The highway continued rushing past, life moving forward, and yet this moment felt suspended in time, a quiet turning point. Hale extended his hand, not as the FBI director, as a person. Briggs hesitated only briefly before shaking it. The gesture felt symbolic, not forgiveness, not approval, recognition. Remember, Hale said gently, respect is not something you give because of a title. He paused. It's something you give because someone is human. The words settled deeply. Briggs nodded slowly, and for the first time since the stop began, he felt lighter. Not because the moment was over, but because he had allowed himself to see it differently. Hale returned to the SUV. The agents prepared to leave. The vehicles pulled back onto the highway, and Briggs stood alone on the shoulder for a moment, watching them disappear into the distance, knowing something inside him had changed, quietly, permanently. The highway felt strangely empty after the black SUV disappeared into the distance. Officer Daniel Briggs stood beside his patrol car longer than necessary, hands resting on his belt, eyes fixed on the road ahead. For years, traffic stops had followed a pattern: approach, assess, control, move on. But today had broken that rhythm. And now, silence felt different. He replayed every word Director Marcus Hale had said, not as criticism, as reflection. Briggs climbed back into his patrol car slowly. The seat felt unfamiliar. The dashboard lights blinked softly. Dispatch radio murmured quietly in the background. Life continuing. Routine waiting. He sat there for a moment before turning the engine on, not because he needed time, but because something inside him needed to settle. Unit 27, respond to eastbound mile marker 112. The dispatcher's voice cut through his thoughts. Driver reported stopped on shoulder. Possible vehicle issue? Briggs reached for the radio. Unit 27 responding. His voice sounded the same, steady, professional. But internally, something had shifted. The drive felt longer than usual. He watched the road differently now, not scanning for violations, observing, listening, thinking. He remembered Hale's words. The real test isn't what you say here. It's how you treat the next person you stop. A small sedan appeared ahead, hazard lights blinking, parked slightly crooked on the shoulder. A young woman stood beside it, phone in hand, looking anxious. Briggs slowed, pulled in behind her vehicle, lights flashing, routine, familiar, and yet completely different. He took a breath before stepping out, not from fear, from awareness. He approached slowly. Good afternoon, he said gently. The greeting surprised even him. The woman looked relieved. Oh, thank you. My car just died. Her voice trembled slightly. Briggs nodded. Are you safe? Yes. Anyone else with you? No. Simple questions, but the tone mattered. He could feel the difference. He listened as she explained the situation. No assumptions, no rush, just presence. He noticed small details, nervous hands, tired eyes, a child's car seat in the back, details he might have overlooked before. You need roadside assistance? He asked. Yes, I called, but they said it might take an hour. Briggs nodded. I'll stay behind you until they arrive. Her shoulders relaxed immediately. Thank you. The gratitude felt genuine, unexpectedly powerful. As he returned to his patrol car, something clicked inside him. The interaction felt lighter, not because the situation was easier, because he had approached it differently. He wasn't controlling, he was helping, and the difference felt significant. Minutes passed. The radio remained quiet. Cars rushed by. The woman sat in her vehicle, calmer now. Briggs leaned back in his seat, thinking again about the morning, about assumptions, about tone, about respect. He realized something important. Change didn't happen in dramatic moments. It happened in small choices, repeated again and again. His phone vibrated, a message from his supervisor. Need to talk later about federal stop today? Briggs stared at the screen. Consequences were coming. He expected that. But surprisingly, he didn't feel defensive. He felt ready. Another car slowed nearby, roadside assistance arriving. The woman stepped out, smiling. Thank you for staying, she said again. No problem, he replied, and he meant it. As he pulled back onto the highway, he felt different. Not transformed overnight, but aware, present, conscious of choices he once made automatically. And for the first time in years, he wondered how many people he had stopped before today, who had simply wanted to be seen. The station felt colder than usual when Officer Daniel Briggs walked inside. Not physically, emotionally. Word had already spread. It always did. A federal vehicle, unmarked agents, an unexpected traffic stop. Stories changed shape quickly once they reached the break room. Some officers glanced at him briefly. Others avoided eye contact. No one said anything directly. But Briggs could feel it. Curiosity, speculation, judgment. His phone buzzed again. Report to Captain Reynolds' office. Simple, direct. No explanation needed. He took a slow breath and walked down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because he feared punishment, but because he knew this moment would test whether his reflection from earlier was real or temporary. Captain Reynolds's office door stood slightly open. Briggs knocked. "Come in." The voice sounded calm, measured. He stepped inside. Captain Reynolds sat behind the desk, posture relaxed but attentive. Another person stood near the window, a woman in a dark coat, Assistant Director Kim. Authority filled the room quietly. Briggs stopped just inside the doorway. "Have a seat," Reynolds said. He did. Silence settled briefly, not uncomfortable, intentional. Kim spoke first. "Officer Briggs," she said calmly, "I want to be clear. You are not here because you stopped a federal official." He blinked slightly. "That's not the issue?" "No," she said. "Traffic stops happen." Reynolds nodded. "The concern is how the interaction unfolded." The words felt familiar, echoing the highway conversation. Briggs nodded slowly. "I understand." Kim watched him carefully. "Director Hale spoke highly of your willingness to reflect." Surprise crossed Briggs's face. "He did?" "Yes." A pause. "He believes learning moments matter more than disciplinary reactions when someone chooses accountability." Relief flickered briefly, but Briggs remained steady. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about punishment," he said. "It's about growth." The phrase felt different now, less threatening, more honest. Kim stepped closer. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Yes, ma'am?" "When you approached Director Hale's vehicle, what assumptions did you make?" The question was direct, but not aggressive. Briggs hesitated, then answered honestly. "I assumed he didn't belong in that car," he said quietly. The room remained silent. No interruption, no judgment, just listening. "And why?" she asked gently. Briggs swallowed. "Because of how he looked," he admitted. The honesty felt heavy, but freeing. Reynolds nodded slowly. "That kind of awareness isn't easy to say out loud." Briggs nodded. "I didn't see it before," he added, "but now I do." Kim watched him carefully. "You understand that bias doesn't always come from hatred," she said. "It often comes from habit." The distinction mattered, and Briggs felt it deeply. "We can send officers through training programs," Reynolds added, "but real change only happens when someone chooses to look inward." Briggs nodded again. "I want to change," he said quietly. Silence followed. Then Kim smiled faintly. "That's the biggest authority shock people misunderstand," she said. "What do you mean?" Briggs asked. She glanced briefly toward Reynolds before answering. "Authority isn't proven when everything goes right," she said softly. "It's revealed when someone admits they were wrong and decides to grow anyway." The words settled deeply. Reynolds leaned back. "There will be a formal note added to your record," he said. Briggs nodded. "I expected that." "But it won't be disciplinary," Reynolds continued. "It will document participation in advanced community interaction training." Briggs blinked slightly. "That's it?" Kim smiled faintly. "That's only the beginning." She stepped closer. "Director Hale requested something specific." Briggs felt his pulse quicken slightly. "What?" "He wants you to attend a federal leadership seminar next month." Surprise hit immediately. "Why me?" Kim's answer came softly. "Because he believes the officers willing to change are the ones worth investing in." The emotional impact landed deeply. Not punishment, opportunity. Briggs sat silently for a moment, processing, realizing that the moment on the highway had transformed into something bigger than he expected. Not shame, growth. Reynolds stood. "You're dismissed." Briggs rose slowly. Before leaving, he turned toward Kim. "Tell him, thank you," he said quietly. She nodded. "I will." As Briggs walked out of the office, the hallway felt different. Not lighter, not easier, but clearer. He realized something important. Change didn't erase the past, but it reshaped the future. The Federal Training Center felt nothing like the local police station. Everything moved slower, more deliberate, less noise, less urgency. Officer Daniel Briggs stepped inside carrying a quiet mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. He had attended training sessions before, procedural updates, tactical refreshers, policy reviews, but this felt different. He couldn't explain why. The room was arranged in a circle, no podium, no elevated speaker, just chairs facing each other. It immediately unsettled him. Authority normally stood at the front. Here, everyone stood equal. Other officers filled the space: local police, state troopers, federal agents, different uniforms, different backgrounds. One thing in common: they had all been selected, not for mistakes alone, for moments that revealed potential for growth. A facilitator stepped forward, calm voice, warm presence. "Welcome," she said. "This is not a lecture. It's a conversation." Briggs shifted slightly in his seat. Conversations required openness, and openness felt vulnerable. "Today," she continued, "we're not discussing tactics. We're discussing perception." The word landed heavily. Briggs felt his stomach tighten slightly. The session began with stories, officers sharing experiences, moments where assumptions shaped decisions, moments where reflection changed them. Some stories were uncomfortable, some painful, some deeply honest. And for the first time, Briggs realized he wasn't alone. One officer described stopping a young driver and later realizing fear had shaped his tone more than professionalism. Another spoke about misreading body language because of past experiences. Each story carried a familiar thread: assumptions, habit, growth. Briggs listened quietly. At first, he didn't plan to speak. Listening felt safer. But as the room opened, something inside him shifted. He remembered the highway, Director Hale's calm voice, the question that changed everything. Finally, he raised his hand slightly. "I stopped someone recently," he began. The room grew quiet. "I thought I was doing my job," he said slowly. "And maybe I was." A pause. "But I wasn't seeing the person." The words felt raw, unfiltered, real. "What changed?" the facilitator asked gently. Briggs hesitated. "He asked me a question," he said. "What question?" "Would you have treated me the same if you knew who I was?" Silence followed, deep, reflective. "And your answer?" she asked. I realized I didn't know. The admission felt heavy, but freeing. Another officer nodded slowly. "That's the moment," he said. "The moment when you stop seeing the badge as power and start seeing it as responsibility." Briggs felt the truth of that settle deeply. The facilitator smiled faintly. "Growth begins when certainty softens," she said. The phrase stayed with him. Certainty softens. He had always believed strength meant being sure. Now he understood strength might mean questioning. Hours passed quickly. Stories layered upon stories. Understanding growing quietly. Briggs realized something important. Bias wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was subtle, invisible, hidden behind routine and experience. During a break, he stepped outside. The air felt calm. He leaned against the railing, thinking. A voice behind him spoke gently. "Looks like you're processing a lot." He turned. Director Marcus Hale stood there, no suit jacket, no visible authority, just a person. "You came," Briggs said, surprised. Hale smiled faintly. "I try to attend when I can." They stood quietly for a moment. "I didn't expect this," Briggs admitted. "What did you expect?" A lecture, he said honestly. Hale nodded. Lectures rarely change people. What does? Experience, Hale said softly, and the willingness to listen. Briggs looked down briefly. I keep thinking about how many stops I've made, he said. Hale waited. How many times I never noticed anything wrong? Hale nodded slowly. That realization can feel heavy. It does, but it's also the beginning. Silence settled between them, comfortable this time, not tense, not uncertain, just honest. You didn't report me, Briggs said quietly. No, Hale replied. Why? Hale thought for a moment. Because punishment doesn't always create change, he said. Sometimes trust does. The words settled deeply. Briggs nodded slowly, and for the first time since the stop, he felt something new, not just awareness, purpose. The training center felt different on the final day. Quieter, heavier, not because people were tired, but because something had shifted inside many of them. Officer Daniel Briggs sat near the back of the room, listening as the facilitator spoke about real-world application. Insight means nothing, she said calmly, unless it changes behavior. The sentence landed directly in his chest, because understanding was one thing, living differently was another. The final exercise began without warning. No scripts, the facilitator said, no preparation. Real scenarios. An assistant entered the room, speaking quietly to her. She nodded. Officer Briggs, she said gently. Yes? We're starting with you. He stood, heart steady but aware. The room watched quietly, not judging, observing. A role-play scenario. A simulated traffic stop. A young man entered from the side door. Casual clothes, hood pulled low, nervous energy in his movements. Briggs felt something familiar stir inside him, old instincts beginning to surface. The facilitator noticed immediately. Just respond naturally, she said. He approached slowly. The young man avoided eye contact, hands moving slightly. Briggs paused. This moment felt identical to hundreds of stops he had made before, and he felt the old patterns trying to take control. Assess quickly, establish dominance, assume risk. Then he remembered Hale's voice. It's about how you see the person. Briggs took a slow breath. Hey, he said gently. Not license and registration, not sharp authority, just a greeting. The room felt the difference immediately. The young man looked up, surprised. Hi, he said quietly. What's going on today? Briggs asked. The question changed the energy instantly. The young man relaxed slightly. My car stalled, he said. I've never been stopped before. Briggs nodded. I'm here to help, he said. And he meant it. The facilitator watched closely. So did Hale, standing silently near the back wall. Briggs didn't notice him yet. He was focused, present, listening. He asked questions, but this time they felt different. Not searching for mistakes, searching for understanding. The young man explained he had borrowed the car from a friend. He seemed nervous, but not threatening, just unsure. Briggs felt something click internally. He wasn't reacting to assumptions anymore. He was responding to reality, and that changed everything. The exercise ended. The facilitator smiled faintly. What felt different, she asked. Briggs thought carefully. I slowed down, he said, and I listened before deciding who he was. The room nodded, understanding. That's awareness, she said gently. And awareness creates safer outcomes for everyone. Briggs turned slightly and saw Hale watching, pride in his expression, not authority, recognition. The emotional weight hit deeply. Later, outside the building, Briggs approached him. I almost went back to old habits, he admitted. Hale nodded. That never fully disappears. So how do you keep changing? Hale smiled faintly. You stay curious. Briggs looked out across the training grounds. Officers talking, learning, reflecting. He realized something important. Transformation wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, built from small choices repeated over time. You gave me a chance, Briggs said. Hale shook his head gently. You gave yourself a chance. The distinction mattered. The sun began to set behind the buildings, long shadows stretching across the pavement, a new day ending, a different person beginning. Returning to duty felt different, not because the uniform had changed, not because the patrol car looked unfamiliar, but because Officer Daniel Briggs no longer saw the world through the same lens. The radio crackled as he pulled onto the road. Routine resumed. Traffic flowed. The ordinary rhythm of law enforcement surrounded him again. And yet, everything felt quieter inside his mind, more deliberate, more aware. Unit 27, report of reckless driving. Possible road rage incident, Highway 14. Dispatch's voice cut through the calm. Briggs responded immediately. Unit 27 en route. The engine accelerated. Adrenaline returned. Training took over. But this time, something else moved alongside it. Presence. 2 vehicles appeared ahead, one swerving slightly, another following closely behind. Tension clear even from a distance. Briggs activated lights, pulled both vehicles onto the shoulder, standard procedure. But he felt the weight of this moment. This wasn't a simulation. This was real. He stepped out slowly, scanning both drivers. One older man, angry, frustrated. The other, a young black teenager, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, fear visible from across the distance. Old instincts whispered quickly. Assess risk, control situation, assume intent. But Briggs paused, just slightly. Enough to notice, enough to choose differently. He approached the older driver first. Sir, I need you to take a breath, he said calmly. The man began speaking loudly, pointing toward the other car. He cut me off, driving like he owns the road. Briggs listened, not dismissing, not escalating, just listening. Then he walked toward the second vehicle. The teenager rolled the window down slowly, hands visible immediately, voice shaking. I didn't do anything wrong, he said quickly. Briggs felt the moment clearly. This was the test. The real one. No training room, no observers, just choice. Hey, Briggs said gently. You're okay. Just talk to me. The teenager blinked, surprised. Yes, sir. What happened from your perspective? The question opened space. The young man explained calmly. He had merged lanes to avoid debris. The other driver reacted aggressively. Fear mixed with confusion in his voice. Briggs listened fully. No assumptions, no rushing, just presence. He noticed small details, trembling hands, eyes watching carefully, waiting for judgment, waiting for escalation. But escalation never came. Instead, Briggs nodded slowly. Thank you for explaining, he said. The teenager exhaled visibly. Relief. Trust forming. Briggs returned to his patrol car, reviewed both stories, examined dashcam footage. The truth became clear quickly. No reckless driving, just misunderstanding amplified by anger. He walked back between both vehicles. This ends here, he said calmly, firm, balanced. Neither driver blamed unfairly, neither dismissed, just resolution. The older man calmed slowly. The teenager thanked him quietly. As they drove away, Briggs stood alone on the shoulder again. But this time, the silence felt different. He realized something deeply. The difference between who he was before and who he was becoming wasn't dramatic. It lived in tone, in patience, in the decision to see people before judging them. His phone buzzed. A message from Hale. Heard you finished the seminar. Proud of the work you're doing. Briggs smiled faintly. Not because he needed approval, but because he understood now. Growth wasn't about proving something to others. It was about becoming someone better for everyone. He returned to the patrol car, lights fading, highway stretching ahead. And for the first time in a long time, he felt aligned with the badge he wore. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, lights from passing cars reflected across the windshield, each one a reminder that life never stopped moving, even when something inside you changed completely. Officer Daniel Briggs drove in silence, not the heavy silence he once felt after difficult calls. This was different, clear, grounded. Days passed, routine returned, traffic stops, community calls, paperwork, conversations. But something subtle had shifted in every interaction. He slowed down more often. He greeted people differently. He listened longer before deciding what he believed. And slowly, he noticed something unexpected. People responded differently too. One afternoon, a young woman approached him at a gas station. "You helped my brother last week," she said. He searched his memory. The teenager from the highway incident. "Oh," he said quietly. "He told me you didn't make him feel like a suspect," she continued. The words stayed with him long after she left, because that had never been something anyone said before. Back at the station, conversations with other officers changed slightly. Not dramatically, but enough. He shared small things he learned during the seminar. Questions instead of lectures. Stories instead of criticism. Some listened, some didn't. And that was okay. Because change wasn't about forcing others. It was about modeling something new. Weeks later, Briggs received an envelope. Simple. No official seal. Inside was a handwritten note. Respect isn't proven when everyone knows who you are. It's revealed when no one does. Keep choosing awareness. Marcus Hale. Briggs read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside his patrol notebook. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. The next traffic stop came late that night. A car pulled over quickly, driver nervous, hands shaking. The kind of moment that used to trigger automatic assumptions. Briggs approached slowly, calmly. "Good evening," he said gently. The driver relaxed just slightly. And in that small moment, he realized how far he had come. The badge on his chest felt different now, not heavier, clearer, no longer just authority, responsibility. Across the country, Director Hale sat in his office, reviewing reports. A photo on his desk caught the light. A younger version of himself, standing beside officers during a training session years ago. He smiled faintly, because he knew something important. True leadership wasn't about preventing mistakes. It was about guiding what happened after them. Back on the highway, Briggs watched headlights fade into the distance. He thought about that first stop, about assumptions, about questions, about growth. And he understood something deeply. Change doesn't arrive as a dramatic moment. It arrives quietly, one interaction at a time. Somewhere ahead, another driver waited, another story, another opportunity. And this time, he was ready to see clearly.